Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we, a business owner and an artist, discuss the business of art and the art of business. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made.
And I'm Ross, creative director at Epic Made, and we're the hosts of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Marcy Selsberg of Blah 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 and Rebecca Blake of Optimum Design and the Graphic Artists Guild.
We are forever grateful for the supporters of our podcast. We are always looking for sponsors. As always, this episode is brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a collaborative of expert artists and animators who help brands tell powerful and engaging stories. We've demonstrated our expertise in visual storytelling, fantasy pop culture, and detailed world building in collaboration with some of the biggest brands on planet Earth, including SYFY, Nickelodeon, and TNT. Visit getepicmade.com and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign.
So on this episode of Pixel Retentive, we're going to discuss how we approach designing a process and the successes and pitfalls we've experienced as creatives in the industry.
Yeah, so Ross and I, honestly, what spurned this entire podcast was Ross and I going off on these dissertations with each other on our normal planning calls, and we'll get off on a creative tangent. If you will, creative is my euphemism for ADHD. It's our ADD tangents. But yesterday we were getting off on one of those when we needed to be talking about something else. I was like, put a pin in it. Let's talk about it tomorrow for the podcast. So here we are. So Ross was giving me a hard time basically because of something he saw that he sees in himself often, is that we are creating these processes and doing these things and iterating, and I'll either get distracted and move on halfway through the thing before I fully fleshed it out, or the other side of it Ross was talking about. What were you saying?
Yeah, so we're sort of revitalizing, revamping our sales process for Epic Made, and one of the things that I feel like we both end up doing, because we're so pixel retentive, because we're sort of perfectionists by nature,
right,
is that we want to have all of the information and all the tools at our fingertips before we really even start. And if we are happy with the amount of knowledge and tools that we have currently, we start, and then another tool will come into play, or another resource will come into play, or more knowledge will come into play, and we'll stop and kind of deviate or ADHD, get distracted, and basically start pursuing this other tool or bit of knowledge that we think could be incorporated. And what it does is it tends to prevent the process from getting to any sort of solid, usable state without an enormous amount of time being lost in research and development, basically.
Yeah, and what that boils down to is that perfect is the enemy of progress. So, right. What we keep doing and what I keep doing, especially in this particular space, is there's these 4 or 5 things that we should be doing right now, right? So I know that, and I should be iterating on those things and experimenting and trying them out. And I'm trying to automate them already and make them the ultimate version of it. But that is ridiculous, because if you do all of that, if you get way ahead of yourself on the process and you all right, well, this is how this should go, you miss all the things that you don't even know. And by the time you start executing, if you ever even get to there, because a lot of times you get hamstringed along the way because you keep overwhelming yourself with this idea of it's got to be done right the first time, that you actually, even if you make it past that part, right, where you actually get to full execution and you realize you made a lot of assumptions that were wrong. So now you're redesigning the thing anyways, and you wasted a shitload of time, energy, heartache, anxiety, pressure, all the things. You might have missed the boat on some opportunities. So it's just get the high level shit down. What needs to happen? This needs to go from here to there, to there, to there, and then manually do the thing. I was actually talking to Jeremy with Rise 25, who helps manage our podcast and put all that stuff out. And he said he sees this time and time and time again, where people are trying to automate something that they don't even really know if it works yet. So
yeah, and I think
takeaway.
I think, yeah, I think that really speaks to something that you and I fall into a lot in not just business, but art as well, where if a new technology comes out or a new, a new update to Photoshop or whatever we're doing, or even a new art style that we want to try to emulate or something like that, we try to figure out the best possible way to do it rather than just taking the practice route.
Yeah.
Right? We both try to get it perfect on the first go as opposed to trying to work through the flaws. Like in my head, even with Supernal, the webcomic, uh, I I constantly feel the urge to like go back to previous episodes and update them because they're not like exactly what I want them to be, because while I got into this groove of just kind of doing it, I'm having like uh post-mortem
Regret.
regrets
Yeah, yeah.
of decisions I made because they're not like the perfect decision that I would have made. And so it's very hard to break out of that mentality. You want to feel like you have all of the information. You want to feel like you're prepared, even if it's starting something like YouTube or this podcast, for example.
Yeah.
You want to feel like you have uh all of the information at your disposal. You want to feel like you have the perfect plan for it. And the problem is it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that you're going to have to change the plan because you can't have all the information until you start doing it. That's the like trap that
Right.
that it's very difficult for us to realize in the moment, is that we're never going to have all of the information we actually need to make the perfect plan without just doing it and failing.
Yeah, and I think I heard somewhere like that is like the definition of like the good leadership is like it's like having 30% of the information and it's like just or something like that. I don't remember the quote off the top of my head, but it was basically like making decisions and going with it like with as limited information as possible essentially. And I wonder where this like idea comes from. I'm trying to think like why is this ingrained in us? Like I'm pretty sure I speak for both of us when I say we were like excellent students growing up. Like I always made honor roll nearly effortlessly, and I think it is that mentality of like we have to get an A. Like we need to have it right. Like a B is not good, a C is terrible. So like, but in life,
Yeah.
like there's no finish line right until you die. So like you can build on a C and make it a B and make it an A, and then like right because but if you wait to start until you've got 100%, like you never start.
I have
Designing the process, I think, should be iterating it.
I have a few different theories on this. I don't know that I like you mentioned. I went to a incredibly demanding elementary and grade school, like basically all the way until 8th grade. The school that I went to was a private school, was extremely demanding from an academic standpoint. And so by the time I hit high school, and I was still doing well there, but by the time I hit high school, I was essentially relearning things that I had learned in 6th grade because my
Sure.
early academia was so demanding. And so I don't know that I had the same fear of wanting to get the best grade outright. Like a lot of my schooling became incredibly second nature by the time I was like 13.
Sure.
And then I went to art school, which isn't exactly prohibitive of getting a 4.0 GPA. So beyond that, I think there is a level of there's two things that I want to address. And I think there's a level of security that we want in our future. And this can be long-term, or it could even be incredibly short-term as far as planning is concerned, whether you're planning a vacation or you're designing a process for sales, especially in business where money is involved and hinges on your decision-making. You want this level of
Assurance.
Right. Yeah, you want this
Oh
level
shit.
of assurance and guarantee that what you're doing isn't a waste of time. And I think social media is the second thing, is sort of, or the internet in general, has sort of, not only has it reduced our attention span, but it's increased this fear in people, I know especially in me, that we're wasting time if we're not performing at our optimal capacity, right? Because you get to see this flood of people at different points in their lives, and some of them are younger than you, some of them are significantly younger than you. Some of them are significantly more successful, and so on and so forth. Some of them you went to school with, and you're gauging your point in life against theirs, and all sorts of really toxic parallels that you're drawing from just being on social media. It's impossible to not do that.
And so many people are so full of shit on social media and lying. It's like you never know what the truth is of, like, somebody's going to, like, I know a guy that was like going to like a car dealership and taking pictures with cars that he didn't own just to, like, act like he owned them. Like, it's like,
yeah, I mean, there's that, but and people are going to do that in real life too, right? They're not. Yeah. You don't necessarily need the security wall of social media to do that. But let's assume that all of it is real, right? Because
sure,
there is a level of perceived urgency and perceived anxiety that you can create just out of delusions, that you're that are formed from lies on the internet, right?
Right.
I wasn't on the internet until 2020, like not the internet, but I wasn't on social media. Like, I created Outer Eye Studios, my personal brand, in 2020 when the pandemic hit.
Right.
And but before that, I had no presence on social media. I mean, you hired me as an artist directly out of college. I didn't need to create a social media presence, and part of the reason I wanted to do it was because I hadn't done it at all. So as an adult, like a 30-year-old adult, I realized that I had a bit of an advantage in that I wasn't ingesting that kind of toxic comparison my whole life.
Yeah.
Right.
And I remember when that happened, because you immediately got very concerned with, like, this community of people you didn't even know that were, like, just like, oh, well, if I say this, they'll be upset with me, as opposed to just, like, really, like, not that you weren't doing what you should be doing or doing, like, what you felt right about, but, like, you would censor yourself sometimes if you felt that the community would be upset about it, like this abstract community. It was interesting.
Well, it's not entirely abstract, but the thing is, you're right in that I didn't think I was going to get trapped by it because I was aware of the concept, ironically, right? Like, I knew that it was a thing that I felt about social media, even though I had never been on it. And I still fell in the trap. Like, I was totally aware that it existed, and I still walked into it, of, like, checking Twitter and making sure, like, oh, do people like me, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that translates when you're planning, because you want to be successful, like what you're seeing, like what you're ingesting. Right. In your day-to-day. You turn on your phone and it's impossible to not see someone who's done something better than you. So I think there's that. When you're designing any sort of process or starting a thing, you want to be able to do it well so that you can actually not be wasting your time and feeding this anxiety of being a failure, or feeding this anxiety of not living up to your potential, even if it's not directed externally. Directed internally, knowing that you can do better, is another part of it.
I think like the big takeaway for the listeners here, like, that I've seen be very, very successful, is that the process should never start automated, right? You should be manually doing the things to see if it works. At a smaller amount, the automation should help for scaling. It shouldn't be built into the actual like, oh, it just needs to be automated, because once it's working, it's working, then you can scale it, right? So that's where the automation comes in. And I think, this idea of like a solid B+, even for a company like ours, where we only put out the best quality work. Like we really strive for that, right? Like that's a huge part of our brand in itself. But our process, you don't need it to be 100% of this like ideal thing out the gate, because there's no way to know what that is until you've started iterating, until you started trying and seeing, oh, well, we thought this was going to work, but it doesn't. So now I'm glad we didn't spend 5 hours setting up like the automated task to go from this software to that software and ping the thing and bounce off a satellite and do all the thing and update everybody's Slack channel. Like, because, that whole thing was a waste of time, right? So you don't want to do that. That's my takeaway on it. That's my advice. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's the pursuit of perfection is sort of futile for sure. I mean, it's something that everyone inherently knows, right? Like both of us know that, but it's very difficult to actually commit to it. Because you never know. The trick, the cosmic trick is you can easily do not enough and fail on not being
on the numbers
being properly.
Yeah.
There's a statistic that I heard, and I don't know the exact numbers, so don't quote me on it, but it's something to the effect of like 2% or like 10% of podcasts pass their 20th episode. Right?
Oh yeah.
Like that's it. Like if you pass episode 20, you're in like the top X percentile of all podcasts of all time, right?
It's like businesses that make it past 5 years, right? Like it's almost done.
It's the same concept. Or like restaurants that don't make it past 2 years, right? Like there's a lot of these myths out there, and I think there's a grain of truth to them. And the underlying point in every single one of them as cautionary tales is that consistency beats perfection every time.
Yeah, wow, right? Without a doubt, right? And the consistency is where you learn what the process should be. And I think tying back into what you said before, I think the whole idea that we're comparing ourselves, no matter what we're doing, to this system that somebody else built, like some other thing out there, and we're like, oh, we need to reach that. And it's like, well, you don't get to see all the behind the scenes and how they got to that, right? Right? Like we look at someone else's podcast, like, oh my God, they do this, they do that. They had to figure that shit out in the way that worked for their thing. And I bet you, and every time, and I know Jason Swank says this all the time, in our mastermind meetings, but he says, go back and look at your favorite influencers. Look at their first episode. It sucks. It always sucks. Their first year probably sucks. So, and he says, if I go back and look at all my episodes, I'm cringing. Like when we go back and look at this episode, when we're on episode 100, we're gonna be like, oh my God, look how terrible. Look, we're just rambling. That's just the process, right? So when you just got to embrace the journey of the process, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. I think it's important to give yourself some grace. And I think that this concept of comparing yourself to other people or to an invisible future you that you want to be at is exacerbated by the fact that social media and the internet has also made us want this thing quickly, right? Mm-hmm. Because you constantly feel like you're behind in your life, even if you're not. You have this idea that I know I'm positive that there are people out there who feel like when they hit 30, if they're not successful, they failed.
Right. I had this arbitrary goal of being listed in Forbes by the time I was 30, because I started my first business at 19, right?
Yeah.
I'm 38. Same. It's not even close.
It's same. And this concept of we've found that there are so many businesses that are incredibly successful that nobody fucking knows about.
Yeah.
Right.
That's super true. Yeah.
And that's a massive comfort to people who you can be successful in your own bubble and never hit mainstream, Hollywood Walk of Fame status, right? You can consistently make, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, and nobody really ever knows your name.
Yeah. And Gary Vee says this all the time, but after, I don't care where you live, right? Even if it's San Francisco, after $150,000, you've got all your needs met, like,
Yeah.
and you're doing quite well. And if you have a nice work-life balance and you put away 150 grand, you don't need to be famous to be very successful, right? Like,
Right.
so yeah, that's definitely true. So
Yeah.
yeah, man. So I really think that like the big takeaways on like how you design a process are to, come up with a strategy, make sure the high level things are in place. Don't compare your thing to anybody else. Now, that's not to say do your research, figure out the best
Right.
place to start, but don't think that it needs to be perfect out the gate. It just needs to start moving, right? My dad used to say this all the time: shit's only a problem when it ain't moving. Like, and that's so true. Like, right? Like, if something's stagnant, that's when it becomes a problem. But like when you're moving, you're always going to be, checking the wind and tacking back and forth and figuring out the way to navigate whatever you're doing. So just get an idea of where you want to end up, right? Like, and you said this to me yesterday.
Yep.
What's the most actionable things that need to happen soon, right?
Yep.
And to go that direction, and then the things will continue to fall in place. But you got to keep making progress and not get stuck in planning.
Right. Yeah. And just, and obviously you need to, there's a part of the process of just doing it that this advice that a lot of creators give of just start. You can't just start and then blindly push forward. You have to constantly be self-analyzing the your past work and what you're going to do better. You have to improve. Mr. Beast said something in a TikTok that I saw as he was doing an interview, and he said, make a video every day and improve only one thing on that video every single day. Every time you make a new video, improve one thing.
Yeah.
By the time you've made 100 videos, you've improved 100 things.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and then, then we can talk, right? Like then now you can call yourself an expert to some degree. You can call yourself a professional in whatever you're doing because you started and you self-analyzed and improved. You can't spend forever in this planning, toiling sort of phase, and you also can't just blindly hope that you're going to succeed.
Right. So so that's that 1% rule, right? Like, if every time you do something, or it's akin to that at least, every time you do something, you make a conscious effort to have a 1% improvement, and the number's arbitrary, right? Like it's the same thing that Mr. Beast said. Like, find a thing and knowingly make that adjustment so it is without a doubt just progress, right? And then it's moving, then you're progressing, and having that objective, like where are we going, and knowing that the progress needs to head that way, and then finding whatever resources you need to get there. And that's part of like the growth journey that Epic Made's been on. Like there has been many years where I was just in reactionary go mode. And that's why we've pivoted back these past 2 years. Like, how do we really scale this thing? Like, what do we really need to do? Because I was always so focused on the work and making sure that you had the people you need after I found you and realized like what level of talent you had, that like, how do we make sure that you've got everything you need to continue to elevate the quality of work? Well, I kind of completely neglected the sales and marketing side of the business. And so now I'm here trying to like, how do we build the consistency of revenue, the consistency of getting in front of the right type of clients at the right time, and taking away some of the luck and happenstance. Now, we happen to be very blessed that like the relationships we built have allowed us to get to a pretty impressive place. But we still, I want to have a machine that works, that generates leads, that gets us in front of the right people at the right time with some level of consistency. It's like you said the other day that, we just need more at bats. And the only way that happens is, we get lucky. But like, how many times are we playing the lotto, right? Like if you don't play the lotto at all, you're never going to win. And the more times you play, the higher chances, right? In business, the lotto is not as hard as like the actual lotto, right? When you've got yourself, dialed into your positioning and making sure that, you're putting out the right value in your messaging for the people that need your services. So
we don't endorse playing the lottery, but
yeah.
but
not much. I spent a lot of money on nothing.
That being said, it is very similar, right? You're paying to play in business, right? You're a lot of the time, organic growth is extremely difficult, and it sometimes takes longer than the runway that you have financially for business, right? So you do need to invest in marketing solutions, or not necessarily a marketing company or anything like that. You just have to have some sort of investment of time and knowledge, and in some cases money, to create a funnel of resources for you to get revenue, right?
Yeah.
It's probably the biggest pitfall that Epic Made has had in its entire lifespan, is that we have neglected that part of it, right? Where we spent so much time just going forward and self-analyzing and improving on the production side of the business.
Right.
We were doing it right on the production side of the business, that we were
Clearly,
we
right?
hadn't realized that we were going to hit some sort of drought at some point, where the magical client fairy was no longer going to bless us with clients every single month, right? Where it just, at some point, it dried up. Marcy Selsberg, when we had her on, even said that, I'm not sure if she said it before the podcast or during it, but she said that, it's slow, like now. Like there's been a drop off of this like ravenous clientele for our industry. That might have stuff to do with AI. It might have stuff to do with the economy and all sorts. There's so many things you could blame it on. It's not really
World 3. There's a lot of shit going on.
There's so many things that you could blame it on. It's not relevant. So, but like the idea that if you don't have some sort of proven process working, right? Even if it's working with duct tape and glue, and bubble gum, right? Like it working to any degree is going to be better than someone who doesn't have it, which is why we're trying to design that sales process on our end. And kind of full circle, how we got into this conversation was that Carl is falling into this trap of, wanting to have all of these best resources and talking to, X guru and Y guru and Z guru, and all of them are like, yeah, you do this thing, and then you do that thing, and then you do this thing. But they're all so deep in their own process that we just need to get a foundation done before we start implementing all of their advice.
Yeah. And in steps, right? Like I need to take one type of thing, make sure that's configured properly to work for our business, get that running, make sure all the things are good, and then go to the next thing and then tie them all into an automated process. So yeah, that's happening now. So I'm really excited about it. And it's been a fun journey so far. So this whole thing has been a lovely journey. It's been quite exciting, and doing that introspective look back at things is always quite nice. So, but yeah, that feels pretty good. Feel like we got some good details in here. What do you think?
We really have to figure out a better way of ending these podcasts. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, I mean, I think without getting into without like unpacking an enormous amount of additional context or additional advice that kind of trails off into other directions, I think that's pretty good for this one.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Ross. Well, it was super fun. Let's see, how do we end these on the solo? Usually we have a guest, right? But sometimes we don't. These are our thought leadership episodes. So we have our little thing worked out anyways. But yeah, that'll work. I think this is fun. Appreciate you guys dialing in. If you guys have any questions or concerns, or you think anything we said was awesome or stupid, let us know. Like let's have a dialogue. You can reach us. I'm on Colorful Carl anywhere on the internet. You can reach us on Epic Made. Ross, what's your handle?
At Outer Eye Studios in basically everywhere on the internet.
And also you can hit us up through Epic Made. And yeah, if you guys need help on your next creative campaign, we'd love to chat. So Take it easy.
Till next time, friends.
Peace.
Bye.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.